Most people start their lives believing something fundamentally wrong. They believe progress requires support, that somewhere someone will appear and make things easier, a mentor who guides them, a partner who stabilizes them, a system that finally gives them a chance. This belief feels harmless, but in reality it creates dependence, and dependence destroys agency. Because when your movement depends on external forces, your life is no longer under your control. It is outsourced. And anything outsourced can be delayed, denied, or removed. This is the first hard truth most people never accept. No one is coming to build your life for you. Not because people are evil, but because everyone is already occupied with their own survival, their own pressure, their own uncertainty. Waiting for help is not strategy. It is disguised paralysis. At first, dependency feels comfortable. It allows you to delay responsibility. You can say, "I will start when I get support. I will act when things are clearer. I will change when I feel ready." But life does not respond to readiness. It responds to action. And the longer you wait, the more invisible you become to opportunity. There is a point in every life where reality becomes direct, not philosophical, not motivational, direct. That point usually comes through discomfort, failure, isolation, rejection, or silence. And in that moment, something becomes undeniable. You are on your own. Not in a tragic sense, in a structural sense. No one will decide for you. No one will execute for you. No one will carry the responsibility of your decisions. Only you. This realization breaks many people, but it builds a different type of person entirely. Because once dependency collapses, something new emerges. Self-direction. And self-direction is the foundation of all real progress. From that point forward, the question changes. It is no longer, "Who will help me?" It becomes, "What can I build without permission?" And that question is the beginning of power. Not emotional power, structural power. The kind that does not depend on validation or support. It depends only on action. Discipline is one of the most misunderstood forces in human behavior. Most people think discipline is about motivation, or willpower, or emotional strength. This is incorrect. Discipline is simply this: the ability to behave consistently without external pressure. And that is where most people collapse. Because human behavior changes dramatically when observation disappears. In public, people perform structure. In private, they abandon it. They promise themselves things they never enforce. They set goals they never execute. They negotiate with themselves in silence. And over time, this silent inconsistency destroys identity. Not suddenly, gradually. Because every broken private promise sends a message to the mind: I am not reliable. And once that identity forms, behavior follows it. This is why most people struggle to change. They are not lacking knowledge. They are lacking internal authority. True discipline begins when you become your own enforcer. No external consequences, no supervision, no reward system, just internal standards. And the most important question becomes, do you respect your own word when nobody is watching? Because if you do not, nothing else matters. You can plan, you can visualize, you can prepare, but you cannot build stability on inconsistency. Real discipline is not dramatic. It is repetitive. It is small actions executed without negotiation. Waking up when no one forces you. Working when no one observes you. Continuing when no one applauds you. At first, this feels mechanical, even meaningless. But repetition changes structure, because the brain adapts to consistency. And eventually, something shifts internally. You stop identifying as someone who tries. You become someone who acts. And this identity shift is irreversible. Once you experience internal authority, external validation loses importance. You no longer need pressure. You no longer need motivation. You operate from obligation to your own standards, and that is where freedom appears. Not freedom from responsibility, freedom from emotional dependency. Because when you can direct yourself without external force, you are no longer controlled by circumstance. You are controlled by principle. At some point, a deeper realization emerges. You are not missing external resources. You are not waiting for the right moment. You are not lacking support. You are lacking execution. This is uncomfortable because it removes excuses, but it also removes limits. Because when responsibility becomes internal, everything becomes possible. One of the most destructive human behaviors is the need for validation. People wait for approval before acting. They wait for recognition before continuing. They wait for reassurance before committing. But validation is unstable. It depends on perception, and perception is inconsistent. If your direction depends on external opinions, your identity becomes fragile. You start adjusting yourself to maintain approval, and slowly you lose direction. Self-ownership begins when external approval becomes irrelevant to action. Not irrelevant to relationships, irrelevant to execution. You act because it is correct, not because it is praised. And you evaluate yourself based on internal standards, not external reaction. This changes everything, because now your identity is no longer shaped by others. It is shaped by repetition of your own decisions. There is a final stage most people never reach: full internal accountability. This is where excuses disappear completely, not because life becomes easier, but because perception becomes irrelevant. You stop asking, "Do I feel ready?" You stop asking, "Is this the right moment?" You start asking only one thing: am I acting or delaying? And you move, even when tired, even when uncertain, even when alone. Especially then. Because at that level, behavior is no longer emotional. It is structural. And structural behavior produces irreversible results. This is the point where a person stops reacting to life and starts shaping it. No longer dependent, no longer waiting, no longer negotiating with fear. Just execution. And when that becomes your default state, something fundamental happens. Life stops controlling you, and you begin controlling your trajectory. Not perfectly, not easily, but consistently. And consistency is the only real advantage that compounds over time. Everything else fades. But disciplined execution remains. There is a silent force that destroys more potential than failure ever could. Comfort. Not pain, not lack of opportunity, not external obstacles. Comfort. Because comfort does not feel like danger. It feels like safety. It feels like enough. And that is precisely why it is dangerous. Comfort does not stop you immediately. It slows you gradually. It convinces you to delay. Tomorrow is fine. I will start next week. I still have time. And slowly, without realizing it, your ambition becomes theoretical, something you think about, not something you execute. Most people never fail dramatically. They dissolve quietly inside comfort. They stop pushing boundaries. They stop tolerating discomfort. They stop challenging themselves. And they begin to optimize for ease instead of growth. At first, it looks reasonable. Rest is necessary. Balance is healthy. Recovery is important. But when comfort becomes the default, discipline becomes optional. And once discipline becomes optional, identity weakens. Because growth has only one fuel: resistance. Without resistance, there is no adaptation. This is why high performance is always uncomfortable. Not occasionally, consistently. Every meaningful transformation requires tension. But comfort teaches the opposite. Avoid tension at all costs. Avoid difficult conversations. Avoid difficult decisions. Avoid difficult emotions. Avoid difficult work. And what remains is a life that feels stable but stagnant. A controlled environment that produces no real evolution. There is a point where every individual must choose comfort or progress. Not once, but repeatedly. Because comfort always returns, every day in different forms. It shows up as procrastination, as distraction, as rationalization, as not the right time. And if you are not aware of it, it wins silently. The only counterforce is deliberate discomfort, choosing the harder task, choosing the longer path, choosing action when inactivity feels easier. Not because suffering is valuable, but because growth demands resistance. There is no adaptation without pressure, no strength without load, no discipline without friction. This is why most people remain at the same level for years, not because they cannot move forward, but because they refuse to stay uncomfortable long enough for change to happen. They exit the process too early, before transformation stabilizes, before identity shifts, before behavior becomes permanent. And then they conclude, "I tried, but it didn't work," when in reality they stopped just before the turning point. Real progress is not linear. It is accumulated discomfort over time, and those who understand this stop negotiating with comfort. They stop asking, "How do I feel?" and start asking, "What does this require?" Because life does not reward comfort, it rewards adaptation. And adaptation only happens when you stay in the resistance long enough for it to reshape you.